With Butch Jones heading into his 5th season and Jaylen Raynor heading into his 3rd season, why not the Arkansas State Red Wolves contending in the Sun Belt West? It's Locked On Sun Belt.
You are Locked On Sun Belt, your daily podcast on the Sun Belt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sun Belt, your teams every day. Thank you for joining us, guys. I need 10 more subscribers for 2,500. Just hadn't gotten there yet. I thought we would. Need your help before kickoff, not counting the App State Charlotte game. I mean, that counts overall, but we were going for Saturday, August 30th. So that is opening day. Need 10 more subscribers. We could do it, right? Someone knows somebody to subscribe to Locked On Sunbelt on YouTube. Really appreciate all the support. It's been amazing, basically since the middle of April, but we still want that 2,500 before we kick off the football season. So please get people to subscribe. All right. We bring in Kevin Turbeville. He has been covering Arkansas State since the 80s, in a row since the 90s. He's in his 4th decade of doing so for the Jonesboro Sun. We talk about Jaylen Raynor. We talk about Butch Jones. What does Arkansas State need to do defensively to compete in the Sun Belt? And kind of Jones doing it the old-fashioned way, building through recruiting high school kids. And the coaching, which used to be, no one was buying. They were renting, as they had one-year coaches a lot in a row. And then Blake Anderson settled things down for a bit before he had to leave, before he did leave. And unfortunately, the tragedy that him and his family went through. And now Butch Jones has rebuilt it up. And can they contend in the Sun Belt West with what should be a very high-powered offense? It's not only Jaylen Raynor, but you do have Corey Rucker and Jarquez Crossback. So you got a lot of offensive weapons. What can Arkansas State do? And they do have Arkansas in the 2nd week of the season. He is Kevin Turbeville. He covers the Arkansas State Red Wolves for the Jonesboro Sun, and he is Locked On Sunbelt. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. We are joined by Kevin Turbeville, the beat writer for the Arkansas State Red Wolves from the Jonesboro Sun. Continuing our feature, the Belt Beat. He's been covering the Arkansas State Red Wolves more than 3 decades. He is his 4th decade in Jonesboro. Really appreciate your time, Kevin. First time we've ever talked, so I thank you. Appreciate you hopping on the podcast. I guess we can go back to we can start the way the 3rd segment is, but Butch Jones has really built the Red Wolves the old-fashioned way, probably with a little help from the portal, but he had a couple of good recruiting classes. Took him a little bit, went to a bowl game his 3rd year, won it in the 4th year. He's got his quarterback back for a 3rd season. It's just been going in a really solid direction since Butch Jones has landed in Jonesboro.
Yeah, he's somebody who would prefer to build it through high school players. And in fact, this year he still signed 20-plus high school players, during the early period. But now, obviously everybody has to supplement with the portal these days, and he's doing that. And, you look at what they've done. The first year they won 2, then they went up to and they won 3. Then they won 6 games his 3rd year, went to a bowl. Last year went 7-1 in games decided by 8 points or less. Ended up 8-5, beat Bowling Green, really nice win in the 68 Ventures Bowl. So certainly they've been on an upward trajectory the last 3 years.
Always the issue that I always have is that these guys, and I think Del McGee is going to have that issue. You get these really good recruiting classes when they come in, but those recruiting classes always take a couple of years to mature, right? Oh. Who can count on 18-year-olds to perform on the field against, generally men? And so that always take a couple of years. And so you do have to have people to have some patience. And a lot of times they don't have patience, but the patience has paid off for Butch Jones as they've, had the program grow. It's not just the football program, but the basketball program did well. The baseball program had a really good season for the first time in a long time. They finally invested in that. So it seems like the whole athletic department is going in the right direction.
Yeah, they ended up 2nd in the Bubas Cup standings this past year. Women's basketball went to the NCAAs for the first time. Men's basketball, 1 game away from the NCAAs for the 2nd consecutive year. Football wins a bowl. Baseball, they put down new artificial turf last year. Obviously, a lot fewer rainouts, missed practices. They're about to start on a player development facility. And then there are some stadium upgrades in the works, too, for baseball. So certainly they're about to try to fund that as well to raise their baseball program up to a competitive level. But they certainly have made a lot of improvements under Mike Silva, last year.
No doubt about it. We're talking to Kevin Turbeville from the Jonesboro Sun, covering the Arkansas State Red Wolves, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. He's on the Belt Beat. All right, I guess one of the main questions is, how did they keep Jaylen Raynor? I mean, someone had to come after him.
Yeah, that's been there's been whispers the last couple of years. He's somebody who takes kind of a long view. One of the times I talked to him in the summer, he basically said, you might get this promised to you somewhere else, but then it might not be there, and you still have to get play. He knew coming back here, he would have a chance that he would be able to play. He would be the man. He also knew that, he knew the system here. He had Corey Rucker coming back with him, great connection there. And he's somebody who wants a chance to get to the NFL. And, sorry about that. My computer went crazy. He wanted a chance to get to the NFL. So he's kind of taking a long view, and keeping him has helped keep guys like Corey Rucker, Jaquez Cross. It helped in recruiting some of these guys on defense as well. So, he's definitely a Butch Jones guy. That's for sure.
That's pretty heady for a 21-year-old. Everybody is, what can you do for me now? And somebody who's looking long-term, that's pretty mature. I mean, there's a bunch of 40-year-olds that aren't that mature, and he's pretty mature for a 21-year-old.
Right. And, most of the guys that they've lost, a lot of, looking back to last spring, a lot of the guys they lost in the portal were guys that they were trying to help go somewhere else. Now there were exceptions. McKeelan Thomas, the offensive tackle who went to Virginia, would be a major exception in that. They lost a couple of defensive linemen who would have played roles. I'm still not sure they're not better on the defensive line this year with some of the guys they brought in. But they really haven't been that hurt by the portal. They've had some guys leave. Everybody does. But, they were able to keep Corey Rucker. Once he came back, he went to South Carolina for a year, was injured out there, just felt like he wanted to come back here. Javonte Mackey, a linebacker who went to Memphis, was one of their leading tacklers in 23. He went to Memphis, didn't work out. He was injured there, same thing. And he thought, the grass isn't greener. He wanted to get back to Jonesboro. So he's back in, and huge boost for them at linebacker as well.
So I was surprised, and I'm a big believer, same coach, same quarterback. And now you got the same coach for the 4th year. Actually, he's going into his 5th year. Right. Right. And Jaylen Raynor is coming back for his third year starter. And they are not picked very high in the Sun Belt West. I was kind of shocked at that. South Alabama is picked higher. The Cajuns in Texas State, maybe not much of a surprise, but I'm surprised that Jaylen Raynor and Arkansas State are not picked to contend. Why do you think that is? Is that a reputational thing, or why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it is their defense is such an unknown. They only returned one defensive starter, Brian Whitehead, and he's really good. He's one of the better ones in the league at putting pressure on the passer, but you just don't know what else you have over there. And, and last year when they lost, it wasn't close most of the time. They won a lot of close games, but then when they played the Cajuns, when they played Texas State, it wasn't really competitive. They got blown out of those games. So maybe that has a little bit of something to do with it. But I think a lot of it is just the unknowns on defense. They really I'm not sure they really – I think they feel like they have talent there, but I don't know that they know really how it all fits yet. Start finding out Saturday when they play SEMO. I think the talent's good.
Right.
But you know how that is. I mean, and it's a new defensive coordinator and a new scheme as well.
Oh.
So they changed – the whole defensive staff is pretty much new.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of question marks over there on that side of the ball.
Talking to Kevin Turbeville from the Jonesboro Sun, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. All right, I do want to talk. We joked a little bit about although it's not much of a joke. He does seem mature. I do say that tongue in cheek, but that is a very mature and heady thing for him to do, looking at the long term. But I did like his growth as a player. It seemed like in his second year, and he's certainly not the first person to do that, or in his first year, he would, I don't know about pout is not the right way to say it, but he would try to force things if he didn't play well early on in the game. Yeah. Last year, it didn't seem like it bothered him too much. And if he didn't play well, he put it behind him, and it seemed like he learned from it. For example, the South Alabama game where he didn't play very well, and they won it at the end. He may have gotten some help from some South Alabama defense, but that's a different podcast episode. And there were some other ball games, I guess Central Arkansas, if he was in bounds or not, he may have been out of bounds, but they won the ball game. So he won at the end. All right. Like you said, they were 7-1 in games that were decided by 8 points or less. So I liked that, where we saw him not worry about what happened in the first 3 quarters and played very strong in the fourth quarter. And now I want to see be better consistent. I want to see him be better consistently greater, I guess. Started off, not give plays away, right? Not fall behind and have to play great at the end. Instead of going down and scoring to take the lead at the end, why not have a 2-score game, a 2-score lead, and then we're in a 4-minute offense where, if the other team scores and make it a 1-score game, we just have to go down and get a couple of first downs, and we're kneeling at the end of the game instead. That's what I'm looking for. Right.
I think that those end of game situations where you saw some of his growth last year, the UCA game, Rucker kind of bailed him out of that one, and that's not counting the score at the end that really shouldn't have been a score. And they would have had one more play to try to win it. So it's whether they would have won or whether they would have lost, we don't know. But against South Alabama, against Troy, they gave up the lead late. He led some really cool drives there, just finding receivers all over the field, knowing and they push the 2-minute drive hard. They work it a lot. Coach Jones makes a point of telling receivers, this is where you're on the field, you need to get out of bounds or you need to get upfield. They work that really well. But I agree with you that last year against Iowa State, he had a rough outing, and then they come back against South Alabama. He's better in that game, and they were able to win it. But I think he would probably want to be more consistent too, and I think he's worked hard on leadership. This is pretty much his team, his offense. They follow him. He's the guy.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but we're talking to Craig Stevenson the other day, probably I guess yesterday's episode. He says there's not going to be an issue with the offense. The problem is maybe like Arkansas State, the defense could have an issue stopping them. You got to go into these ball games like South Alabama isn't winning too many games, 21-17 or 28-24. You got to go into the ball game thinking you got to score 31, 35, maybe 42 points. Yeah. And so when you get stopped, that's an issue. Also, it's not going to be like Troy a few years ago when John Summerall is handing it off to Kamani Vidal. And if he gets 2 or 3 first downs, he can punt it, flip the field, and stop him defensively. That's not going to happen either. You got to, maybe they are more aggressive going for 4th down on their own 45-yard line or something like that. And so you got to be able to convert almost each and every time. And that's what I'm looking for. Maybe the word is I'm looking for more excellence earlier on in the game rather than just bailing the team out at the end of the game.
Right. And he has good weapons around him. Like we mentioned earlier, Corey Rucker is back. He's definitely a playmaker. Yeah. They brought in some guys around him. I think their receiver core is pretty deep. The running back core is deep. Jaquez Cross is a guy who's really versatile, an all-purpose guy. Kenyon Clay transferred in from Southern Miss. He's going to kind of be the big back that they need in that 4-minute offense. Devin Spencer is another guy to keep an eye on. He's a sophomore who played a little bit as a freshman, but didn't play as the year went on. So I think they're in pretty good shape at that. The offensive line, they're still trying to sort that out a little bit. They have one returning starter, and I'm not sure he'll be in the lineup Saturday. So, they're really trying to piece things together on the offensive line a little bit. But if they get that sorted out, there are a lot of things there on offense for them to make some things happen.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football prediction into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. In fact, it's already here. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if your picks are right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. I've used Prize Picks for a few seasons now and love how simple it is. I can get a lineup in before my coffee finishes brewing. The flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still double your money. Prize Picks puts their members first, so withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in your lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. And Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts. And that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is a doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drink. And again, I'm giving those tours in the rack houses. It can get hot and stuffy, and you do it a couple of times, and you need to hydrate to stay hydrated throughout the day. And I'm using Drip Drop. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now as the heat is hitting hard. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. Let's continue our conversation with Kevin Turbeville, the beat writer for the Arkansas State Red Wolves, Jonesboro's son. What does Arkansas State have on the defense? Only one returning starter and a whole new coaching staff and a whole new scheme. He is on the Belt Beat. He is Kevin Turbeville, and he is Locked On Sunbelt. All right, so let's flip the field. We're talking to Kevin Turbeville from the Jonesboro Sun, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. He is on the Belt Beat in his 4th decade of covering the Arkansas State Red Wolves. All right, so you mentioned the one player returning. I don't know if that's good or bad. Like you said, they don't know what they have. But what they had last year wasn't all that great. Obviously, Arkansas State was not very good defensively. Not only have the players turned over, but the coaching staff and the scheme has turned over. Are there some players that you're looking for to make a mark this year defensively for Arkansas State? And what is the scheme changed to? Everyone's going to this 4-2-5, which I am not a big fan of, but that's what everybody's doing.
I think they use some 4-2-5, but they use some other things as well. It's kind of one of those multiple hybrid schemes. In the secondary, I would look for A.G. McGee, a transfer from Marshall. Started at Marshall last season. He's a guy they're counting on for some leadership there. They brought in a couple of transfers at cornerback, Vontae Dickerson from Utah State. They brought in Trenton Allen-Yo from App State. Those are a couple of guys that are going to play a lot. I mentioned Javonte Mackey at linebacker. He's, he kind of gives them some knockback ability there, physical ability. Interior line, they have some transfers who come in, Cody Sigler from West Alabama, just several guys there. Chris Bodie from Liberty, just several guys that they're counting on to come in, and obviously Ryan Whitehead as well. There are a couple of freshmen who might play early on for them. Nigel Nelson, a linebacker from Pensacola, a guy who they flipped from Florida Atlantic late in the recruiting process. He's really shown up in camp. Ryan Reese, a defensive lineman from Birmingham, he's a guy who's definitely shown up as well. So, there's just so many guys who could fit into what they're doing defensively. It's just kind of tough. Brandon Barnes is a sophomore, played a lot late in the year. He's going to be counted on as a leadership role, so much so that Butch Jones took him to Sunbelt Media Days. That I think that tells you what they're kind of expecting there from him. So, just a lot of roles still being hammered out there, I think.
I could be wrong. I say this all the time. I could be sitting there with the coaches. They could be explaining to me what the football thing is going on in the film. I'm much more of a baseball guy. I feel like the 4-2-5 is we're not getting beat over the top. We're going to try and cover the receivers and keep everything in front of us. Whereas I'm much more of I want to be aggressive. I want to force the play. If they beat us over the top, all right. But I'm going to force them to make a play and hopefully make a fast decision. Whereas maybe once in a while, we get a turnover or a sack, or we force them to make a fast decision. How do you see the 4-2-5? Because I'm not the biggest fan.
Well, what they're doing here, and I'm just going by what they do. I do think they're going to bring some pressure. I think that they're going to be kind of aggressive with it. They feel like they have some guys out there who can play on an island and maybe take some chances there. But it remains to be seen what they're going to do in a true game situation. The second scrimmage here was closed. Which is a little bit unusual, but I guess when you're playing an opponent 2 hours up the road, and then you've got the big state school as your second game, you might want to keep things under wraps a little bit. But I do think they're going to be aggressive.
All right, so I like that. I would much rather try and go make a play and see. Again, if they beat me 40 yards downfield, good for them. But if I'm just sitting back, like again we saw South Alabama do. It's not like Jaylen Raynor put it downfield. It was just dink and dunk. 5. He took what they gave him. It was like we're just marching on downfield, and all they needed was a field goal. It's not like they needed a touchdown.
Yeah, a lot of short passes. And one thing that they do, they also have their place kicker, Clune Van Andel, back, and he was really good last year. It's been amazing the success that Butch Jones has had with place kickers. His first couple of years, his first year, he had Blake Groupie, who kicks for the Saints.
Right.
Then the 2 years after that, he had Dominic Zavada, who's the first team preseason All-American by the Associated Press at Michigan this year. He left last year by the portal, and now last year Clune Van Andel just stepped right in, and just seemingly made all the kicks.
Cajuns are going to have to replace a kicker. Kickers are like umpires; you don't notice them until they miss, right? You expect them. You expect them to make everything, and the Cajuns. We'll see how that goes for the Cajuns because they lost a really good kicker. Like the Cajuns' all-time leading scorer is all they lost. Just simple as that. All right, so we'll talk about the Arkansas game here in a minute. Let's take a timeout. We'll come back and wrap up our conversation with the Jonesboro Suns. Kevin Turbeville. We talk about how Arkansas State has built their football program. When I joined the Sun Belt, when no one was buying, they were all renting, from Hugh Freeze to Gus Malzahn to Brian Harsin. Everyone was there for about a year. And then Blake Anderson settled things down. And then Butch Jones had to rebuild things. So we talk all about that. And can they contend in the Sun Belt West? Do that right after I tell you about Open Phone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Open Phone solves that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this. And the AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so I never miss a customer again. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. Let's continue our conversation with Kevin Turbeville. We talk about the coachings that the head coaches that Arkansas State has gone through, how big this ball game is coming up with Arkansas. The two teams have never played, and can Arkansas State contend in the Sun Belt West? He is on the Belt Beat, been covering Arkansas State for almost 40 years, and he is locked on Sun Belt. He is Kevin Turbeville. In a minute, we're talking to Kevin Turbeville from the Jonesboro Sun. talk about Arkansas State football, because when I came in to the Sun Belt, 2013, 2014, this was, you didn't buy in Jonesboro, you rented, because the coaches were there, 1 year, right? It was, Malzahn, and then Hugh Freeze, or maybe it was Hugh Freeze and then Malzahn.
Yeah.
And then Harsin was there for a little bit, maybe a couple of years. And then Blake Anderson, he started out real well, and then unfortunately had the tragedy with his wife, and he moved on. And it's taken a little bit of time, obviously, for Butch Jones to turn things around. How do you think Butch Jones did it? Obviously, the AD was there, and he went on to UCF, and then the next AD came in, and then he's gone. Obviously, it takes everybody, as coaches say, pulling the rope in the same direction. So it's taken a little bit of time for everybody to do that, but it feels like everybody has.
Right. You gave a pretty good synopsis there. Steve Roberts was the head coach here from 2002, 2010, set a good foundation that, and there was talent here for Freeze and then Malzahn to work with, and they both added to it as well. Harsin had a decent year, then he went back to Boise. Blake Anderson, when he got here, he had holes to patch, and it felt like he was patching holes the whole time.
Oh.
Because defensive linemen, just different offensive linemen, just different. It seemed like they were always patching things together. Really, by his last couple of years, obviously you mentioned the tragedy that the Anderson that he dealt with, and the talent level just really kind of dropped. You couldn't really see it up to about 2020, and then that year, and even though they beat Kansas State that year, it just they couldn't really measure up in the trenches against somebody like the Cajuns, or and it just took some time to rebuild that. And I know in a portal era, it seems like there's not patience sometimes, but I think that people were patient. I think they understood that there needed to be some time for him to get guys in here, and they look a lot different now than they did 4 years ago. They dress out differently, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, one of the and you'll remember this because it was in Jonesboro. It was, as somebody who at the time was covering the Cajuns, it was one of the more impressive. I think it was like a 13-minute drive.
I remember that.
Yeah, Levi Lewis let him down, and scared money don't make money. So, and then he went for it on a fourth down, didn't kick a field goal because there was going to be enough time to go down and maybe score a touchdown. So Napier went for it on fourth down to convert it, to run out the clock, didn't score a touchdown. But it was like an 80-yard, maybe a little bit longer even. Maybe it's just 75, but it was like a 12-and-a-half, 13-minute drive, and they just converted third down after third down. I don't think there was a long third down, but it's like third down and 3. They just kept on running the football and converting short third downs, and it just had to be painful to watch for Butch Jones. But as a football guy, it really was a thing of beauty. That's what I want to see Arkansas State do this year. If you had talk about a 4-minute drill, that was a 12-minute drive or something.
Yeah,
along those lines.
Yeah. It felt like it seemed like they could have driven 200 yards if they needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just didn't seem like they were ever going to stop until the time ran out, or they got to the end zone and the time ran out. So, and the shocking thing was how close that game was. I really didn't think it was that close.
Yes. Yes.
But
well, the Cajuns that year played a bunch of close games that year.
Yeah.
That was the thing. They won. Levi Lewis didn't. It was amazing how Levi Lewis didn't quite take that next level to be consistently great, like I'm talking about, but he couldn't miss on those deep balls. He hit the deep balls all year long. And so we could ask Southern Miss head coach. He got Levi Lewis in that bowl game, which was Mike Desimo's first game as Cajuns head coach. So it was interesting how that all worked out. We're talking to Kevin Turbeville from the Jonesboro Sun. He is on the Belt Beat, covering the Arkansas State Red Wolves. He is Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. You did mention second game of the season, Red Wolves taking on Arkansas. First time in the history that these two schools are going to be playing. I was hearing people downplaying that the tickets were being sold, that Arkansas wasn't buying them because they don't want to go there. And if they do go there and if they lose, it's a waste of money. It is an Arkansas home game, as it turns out. I'm talking Southern Miss beating Mississippi State and Jeff Lebby being on the hot seat. Sam Pittman has been on the hot seat for the past 2 seasons. He loses to Arkansas State. He may not last the season. But it'll be interesting. Is this game sold out yet? Do you think the game will be sold out? How much does the game mean in the state?
That's an interesting thing. I think, there were during the 80s, there were some legislative moves to try to force Arkansas's hand. They had a policy against in-state competition that really went back to the 1940s. And it seemed like it was just unbreakable. And then they relaxed it around 2019. They said, well, we'll play UAPB, we'll play UALR, our sister schools in the U of A system in basketball and that. Then the next year, it was kind of during the pandemic, actually, they relaxed it to go, well, we'll play Arkansas State and UCA in other sports. And then the next thing you know, in early 2021, they've set up this football game. So it just, kind of over time, I think Arkansas has just relaxed it. Dave Van Horn in baseball really had a lot to do with relaxing it, I think, in that, he doesn't care who he plays.
No, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it helps recruiting in baseball. And
with Arkansas, they used to play they've got over a 100-year tradition of playing in Little Rock. They used to play 3 or 4 games there a year. Maybe. No. Yeah, for a long, long time. Because it was hard to get to Fayetteville, before they built the interstate, before they opened up the bigger airport there. It was hard to get in there. So they would play a lot of games in Little Rock, 4 games a year maybe. But now that's changed. You've got a 76,000 seat Palace in Fayetteville, whereas Little Rock is 55,000 seats. They have trouble running a game in Little Rock because they don't do it very often. It seems like they'll run out of water at those concession stands or stuff like that. And I don't know if they'll play there again after this game. That kind of remains to be seen. I don't know that they have another game scheduled there. But this is a game Arkansas State fans have yearned for years. It's different now maybe than it was in the 80s before they started playing everybody around the country a who's who of college football. So, in some ways they're a little bit jaded about that maybe because you just get used to it. When you play Michigan, you play Ohio State, you play Alabama, Georgia, you're used to playing the big names now, but this is still different.
Right.
This is the big guy across the state
in town. Yeah. And there are some big ball games, right? South Alabama is going to Auburn. That's a big deal. Southern Miss is hosting Mississippi State. If it was the other way around, it'd just be another football game. Right. But that's a big deal. And do I think did Arkansas play Arkansas State in basketball this past season?
No, they didn't. They haven't worked that out yet. They play in baseball. In fact, next year in baseball, I think they're playing a 2-game midweek over there.
Okay.
No, they played in women's basketball the last 4 years.
All right. I feel like Calipari's not going to have a problem doing that.
No, I don't think he would either. It just depends on. I think he's interested in strength of schedule, and obviously Arkansas State would have to go over there and play. But I think
not going to hurt. Well, not going to hurt the strength of schedule that much compared to other teams.
Arkansas State was top 100 last year.
Yeah.
So, and it'll be interesting to see how they are this year with a totally new team and coaching staff. But they seem to have recruited very well, and Coach Pannon's system is really – it's a lot like what Coach Hodson did here.
Well, in this case, just like last year, if you're going to as long as you're not boring, and Arkansas State isn't boring. They throw up threes – and not necessarily the best defensive squad. So they always allow a lot of points. And so, although when they do win, they play good defense. That's
right. Another thing, going back to the football schedule a little bit, they had that Arkansas game. Obviously, that's huge. Then the next week, you've got Iowa State coming in here, which may be that may be the biggest home game they've ever had. The highest ranked team to come here in the AP poll is Coastal Carolina with Grayson McCall. They were number 15 when they came in here, and I think it was 2021. Right now, Iowa State's number 22. They just beat Kansas State. They're going to move up in the next poll, assuming they don't lose to South Dakota. And then if they beat Iowa in their big rivalry game, they come in here 3-0. They could be a top 15 team in the country, and that's pretty huge, But that's back-to-back Arkansas and Iowa State. And that Iowa State game, that thing's been on the books since 2013. They actually signed the contract for that in 2013, and then they played in Ames last year. And now this year, the Cyclones come to Jonesboro, and it's really a huge home game.
And then who do they have after that? Because do they have an off week after that? Because that's rough.
They could use one. They're playing Kennesaw State, first year Conference USA. Kennesaw State's head coach, Jerry Mack, is an A-State alumnus. He played here around 2001 to 2003. So that's kind of an interesting, a lot of little interesting connections in this schedule. You look at Southern Miss later in the season, Blake Anderson's their offensive coordinator.
Right.
Right. Georgia Southern comes here. Ryan Applin, their all-time leading quarterback statistically, his passing offense. He's Georgia Southern's co-offensive coordinator, I think.
Wow.
And it's always a big deal when the Cajuns come to town too. That's an opponent that people recognize, and that's going to be one of the neat things with Louisiana Tech coming back to the Sun Belt. People here will recognize that. And that'll be neat.
Is that a potential rival? I didn't realize it. Is that a good rival? Oh, yeah.
A-State and Louisiana Tech have a long history in a lot of sports. And, in football in the 70s, both those teams really ran the Southland Conference back then. A-State finally beat them in 75 when they went 11-0. That was a pretty big rivalry. Through the 70s and 80s. Tech kind of dominated it in the 90s, and it just kind of ran out at that point. But that'll be a big deal, get Louisiana Tech back on the schedule. There's a lot of older fans here that can identify with that, and I think that's going to be good for them in all sports, really.
You're going to give me a Tim Rattay? You're going to give me a Tim Rattay reference?
I remember him throwing a lot of touchdown passes.
We all do. I wasn't in the South, but we all do. Some of us may have, cashed in on a couple of those touchdown passes.
Tim Rattay.
I'm
trying to remember if he was the quarterback when they came in here and scored 69 points. It was one of those years in the late 90s. They came in here. They were a PAT away from 70 points. I mean, they really could fill it up. Right. But it was a fun series, and I'm sure people here going into next season will be looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be good. We'll see if I got to think we're going to hear about something about that soon, because it's got to be sooner than later. Whether La Tech is going to get into the Sun Belt here for 2026.
Yeah, I guess it could be 2027 before they're back in.
It could be. Yeah. I don't think that's going to please anybody. So
no, that's not really a good thing to be a lame duck for another year,
Yeah, it's just and it's going to be an odd deal because Texas State is leaving, and it's an odd number for the Conference USA as well. So I think it's in everyone's interest, and usually those things get done.
They do.
It feels like it'll get done. Yeah. He is Kevin Turbeville from the Jonesboro Sun in his fourth decade of covering the Arkansas State Red Wolves. Really appreciate your time, Kevin. Thank you so much for hopping on Locked On Sunbelt. He is on the Belt Beat. Hope to catch up sometime during the year. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate your time.